formal officers.
Good evening, everyone. I think it's time we could get started. I'll quickly introduce Mark and then leave it to him for the rest. Mark holds a PhD in Behavioural Sciences. He is an advisor working across the health and research teams in BIT's London office. And today he's here to discuss a rather topical issue of how to tackle bias in policy making. So over to you, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you. How are we doing acoustically? Can everyone hear me if I stand here? Okay, who are you all? Are you PhD students, MPP students? Give me something to work with. People are nodding. MPP. Faculty? Anyone faculty? Anyone worked in government before? My goodness. What, internships or what are we talking? Jobs, proper jobs, okay. So you look young, I'm sorry. Okay, it's very nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me to your series. I noticed that I am, by some distance, the least distinguished member of the speaking series. I think you've got Land Pritchett in next week to complain about RCTs, so I'll do my best to make up for my lack of prestige with some interesting data. So this is a talk which I've actually been giving around government for the last few weeks in a few different government departments. So it's not your typical, here's a paper I wrote and let's dissect it and throw academic criticism on it. It's kind of a live document. So if you want to give comments or objections throughout, I'm fine with that. You can also do Q&A at the end. So it's a presentation in 3 parts. The first is me summarizing this paper which I co-wrote, Behavioural Government. That'll take about 35 minutes. The second is looking at individual level solutions to the problem of bias in government. And the third part is looking at structural level solutions. So how would you permanently upgrade the reasoning capability of government and end bias forever? Which will take about 5 minutes with the time we have. Okay, does anyone know what the Green Deal is? Good, okay, most people in government have forgotten it too. So in 2011 to 2013 was really the heyday of the Green Deal. It was, the issue was there's energy efficient appliances out there and people are not really making use of them. They're not installing them, they're not accruing the benefits. So what is that? Is it a lack of liquidity? Is it a behavioural issue? Present bias maybe there's a high upfront costs of installing this stuff and the benefits accrue slowly over time. So the solution, the policy solution was the Green Deal. We'll give people cheap loans essentially. Bit of a sign-up process, then you can install the energy efficient appliances, the country gets more energy efficient, you save money in the long run, it's win-win. So what I want to call your attention to in the bottom left there is look how many readings that went through in the House of Lords and House of Commons. A lot is the answer. On the bottom right, that's a report still available online, published by the then Department of Energy and Climate Change. It's 107 pages. It's a comprehensive response to every concern raised by stakeholders about whether this would work or not work, or how it could be improved. And this was the result. So 6 months in, literally 4 people had signed up to the deal, which was not ideal. And 2 years later, it was discontinued. So I'd like to start with that example because it's a useful example of what was probably a biased policy-making process. It's very hard to prove a policy-making process was biased, but a pretty good diagnostic tool is surprise. A competent government should rarely be surprised by the policy outcomes of the policies it creates. It's fine to do risky policies and for them not to work out, but you should know it's risky going in. You shouldn't do as much deliberation as this policy received and do a 107-page report and then the policy, let's be frank, totally bomb. You'd be taken aback by it. That suggests something went wrong in that policy-making process. And that's what this report is basically about. The broader context is, anyone heard of BIT before? Does anyone know the work we do? Some people are nodding. Okay, so we were set up in government in 2010 with 7 people, but now like 150 across the world. And the focus by us and by everyone in this area has always been on addressing the issue of cognitive biases, like thinking errors, mental heuristics, mental shortcuts we all use to make decisions. And to address how cognitive biases can lead to worse decision making about consumers and citizens. But it was always directed outwards. How to get people out there to pay their taxes on time, do better healthcare behaviours, become less likely to engage in recidivism, that sort of thing. Look at these reports. Like on the left there, World Bank, us in the middle, OECD on the right. Heaps of case studies, RCTs galore, but it's always outwards focused. And yet we've never believed that we ourselves were immune to bias. But there's not been a lot of work on it. There's a few like libertarian think tanks that keep throwing that in our faces. You at BIT, aren't you subject to biases yourself? Why are you doing any work at all in this area? So about a year and a half ago, we finally cobbled together some internal funding and then spent 18 months writing this. Behavioural Government, written by me and Michael Halsworth, who's now the head of our North American team, and 2 colleagues from the Institute for Government. So this is us just basically turning that lens inward and saying that actually, yes, we agree, we think we in government, we are still 1/3 owned by the Cabinet Office, which is the office that works directly with the Prime Minister. We're still partially privatised. We in government, we in civil servants, we think we're affected by these biases as well. We're not immune from it. And what implications does that have for when we're trying to create policies? So basically, don't worry about the hours. There's this framework, and by the way, if you just Google behavioural government, you'll find the 60-page report. It's available online for free. So if you've got like detail-oriented questions, I'll probably just direct you there. So this is the basic model we're working with in the paper. It simplifies the policy-making process into 3 stages: noticing, deliberating, executing. So noticing, why does government even think that this is a problem to be solved? Right? How does it get on the table? Why put energy into solving this and not that? Deliberating is, okay, we think it's a problem, what are we going to do about it? Like that the process you saw with the Green Deal, like talk about it for years, invite outside academic experts, and we'll figure out what we're going to do. Executing is the least sexy part of policy making, the least glamorous. Okay, let's just go out in the world and make sure it gets done properly. This is like the nitty-gritty, final mile detail that will totally screw over your policy if you don't do it, and that we in BIT have messed up in the past as well. So there's biases at each stage. Rather than give you a definition of each laboriously, I propose to just keep throwing examples at you, and you'll develop an intuition for what I'm talking about. One thing I will call your attention to is all the arrows are kind of pointing up towards optimism bias, which is kind of master bias in government, and I'd like to get your opinions on that later on. Okay, first, noticing. Why does government even think that this is a problem to be solved and not that? I love this study. This is an economics paper from about 10 years ago. It summarized 5,000 natural disasters over 40 years and looked at how much US television news coverage they received. Can you read the title? Can you make that out the back? Number of deaths needed to receive as much media attention as 1 death from a volcano, which is the most dramatic way you can die in a natural disaster. It's sudden, it's spectacular, it's guaranteed news coverage. So that's your baseline, right? 1 death from a volcano gets X minutes on US television news. So for earthquakes and fires, you need 2 to 12 deaths compared to 1 for a volcano. For storms, floods, and landslides, you need several hundred. For epidemics, droughts, and cold waves, you need several thousand. Famines, any guess? Pardon me? A million, lower. Less depressing than that.
50,000.
50,000, all right, close enough, 40. Which is high. So that's interesting for a lot of reasons. I could do a talk just on this graph alone, but one thing, I'll call your attention to probably 1 or 2 things. So the first is that these distortions in attention correlate with US aid decisions. So the more coverage you get, the more likely you are to get aid. And the quintessential UK example is the Ethiopian famine in the 1980s, which before it was a term went viral because of a BBC news coverage. Then it just kind of spun up, and pretty soon half the country was talking about it. Doesn't always happen for every natural disaster out there. The inverse is also true. If you suffer a natural disaster when during the Olympics or World Cup, you're kind of out of luck. There's always so much media oxygen out there. You might say, why is that a problem? We live in a democracy, right? So I'm telling you that certain disasters will get more attention than others. Why is that wrong? Right? If people care about something and the politicians then say, okay, we'll do something about it, what's the problem there? So throughout the report, we go into kind of a boring distinction of criticizing policy in a technocratic versus political sense. So we, as civil servants, we can only aim to do policy as well as we can technocratically. And from that perspective, we'll start with the view that each of these lives matters equally, and we should try to be directing aid to them in an equal, equitable manner. There'll be a separate argument politically about what's sensible to do and what to get you votes. And this ordering will be different for different countries. Like floods, for example, do get decent coverage in the UK, but there will always be a rank ordering. Anyone who's worked in government or follows the news will know that, right? Certain issues will just get more media attention than others. So that's your initial stage. That's how stuff gets on the table. Another issue in that noticing stage is framing. So framing is just the language you use to describe a set of underlying facts. The facts themselves don't change, just the language. This is an Ipsos Mori poll from a few years ago, given to 2,000 British adults. So one group here were asked, do you support or oppose giving 16 and 17-year-olds the right to vote? 52% support. This group over here were asked, do you support or oppose reducing the voting age from 18 to 16? 37%. So the majority fixed, which is interesting. That has obvious implications for things like, how you phrase referenda, language you use to describe policies. If we in government are writing notes for ministers or other civil servants, what framing we choose to put on that. Because the way you frame a policy can affect how you interpret it and also how even policymakers react to it. So this is a graph actually summarizing 3 studies. On the left, university students, I think in Israel, in the 1980s. In the middle, real nationally elected politicians in Belgium, Israel, and Canada. And on the right, almost 3,000 civil servants from DFID, the Department for International Development here in the UK, and the World Bank. And okay, there's a lot going on here. Has anyone heard of the Asian disease hat? Any behavioral science hipsters in the room? No, okay. So this is it's been used in social studies, popularized by Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman in the early 1980s. The scenario is basically, there's an Asian disease ravaging your country. You as a policymaker have to react to it. What are you going to do? You can choose a risky solution or a riskless solution. That's the basic setup. The framing element in it is how you describe the likely outcomes of that Asian disease. So say you've got a population of 300 people, you can choose to describe that as, okay, depending on what you do, 200 people are going to die. Or you can say 100 people are going to live. So underlying numbers stay the same, right? It's just framing, the underlying facts don't change. So when you describe it in terms of deaths, you're activating loss aversion. Like we saw with this previous example, why does that majority drop? Because on the right-hand side, you're activating loss aversion, which is the tendency to feel losses more strongly than equally sized gains. So the displeasure of losing 20 pounds is stronger than the pleasure of finding 20 pounds, for example. Activating loss aversion reliably leads to distorted decision making. In this case, it makes people more likely to endorse the risky policy option across multiple decades, across every sample measure. That's what's happening on the y-axis. Proportion of people endorsing that risky policy option in the Asian disease class. When you give it to them in risky terms, they're overwhelmingly more likely to select that option in that loss frame. So framing can affect how policymakers react to data. The issue with framing is it also suggests different obvious solutions. For example, this is a study done in English and replicated in German, which gave people descriptions of a city, hypothetical city, which is again being affected by crime. One group of people, they saw that crime issue described as like a virus, which was infecting the city. Another group, the crime issue was described as like a beast, which was preying on the citizens in that city. And then they asked them, what's your preferred policy solution for dealing with this problem? So people who saw that crime as virus description, what do you see? They're like 44% favouring social reform, right? Which is a sensible conclusion. A virus is a problem with the broader environment. You scrub the broader environment and get it clean, and that's how you take care of the virus. When you're talking about crime as a beast, that's something which is preying on people, which needs to be locked up and put in chains and locked away. And there you see much more people willing to favour enforcement policies. Lots of policies, lots of politics fundamentally like that. It's a fighting about framing, about how who gets to own certain issues. Like drug use. Who owns that? Is that the Department of Health or the Home Office? Is that a crime issue or just a health issue? Language you use will affect what people naturally think is the obvious answer to that. Or there was a good blow up on Twitter. Anyone use Twitter? No? Okay, thanks. During the Windrush scandal a few months ago, which has died down a bit now, someone from the government, who I'm forgetting, probably for the best, tweeted that the government, this is atrocious that these Windrush residents have been deprived of their citizenship. We're going to step in. We're going to solve this. The government is riding to the rescue. And the MP David Lammy replied on Twitter. I love that things happen on Twitter now as a live news event. He replied to that tweet saying, no, that's totally wrong. These people already have citizenship. You're not stepping in to give it to them. They have it. You're coming in to fix something that you made a mistake on. Same underlying facts, very different framings. Different framing implies who owns the blame, who should portion the solution. I have a bit of a cough, I'm sorry if I sound hoarse. If you need me to speak up, just tell me. I love this study, I can't get enough of it. So, framing, it affects all sorts of things. It affects how policymakers interpret data. So this is a study done in Denmark with hundreds of real Danish politicians, people who have real control over purse strings. I asked one of the authors, how did you do it? How did you get so many politicians to complete your survey? And it turns out in Denmark, you just need to email politicians asking them to complete your survey, and they will. And they'll reply to it and say, sure, no problem. So as well as topping like every social indicator out there, Danish people will also happily complete your survey and drop it. Okay, so standard setup again, RCT, 2 arms. One group of politicians is shown at the top left. Imagine, I need you to evaluate these schools, tell me which is the better performer. So the labels are just simple, like school A and school B. If I gave you that data on the top left and only that data, and I said, tell me which is the better performer, how would you do it? Calculate percentages. Yeah, that's all. Pretty much all you can do, right? If that's all you have to work with. So there is, do a bit of maths and you get the right answer. There is a right answer. If you do that, there's kind of decisively a better school. So one group saw that, school A, school B. And the other group saw the bottom right, private school, public school, which is a reasonably contentious issue in Danish politics. Who's going to fund issues, like most countries, who's going to fund schools, police stations? Should that be privatized? Should it be under government? So the numbers are the same, right? That numbers never change the framing effects, just presentation. This is the result. There's a lot going on here, so I'll just unpack it for a minute. So they gave them that maths test. The other thing they did, which made this study really interesting, was they measured the politician's ideology, general ideology, how much you generally support public provision of services, which is what you see on the x-axis there. So what's that happening? So it's weakest to strongest, right? Basically most right-wing to left right-wing. I don't really know what a right-wing politician in Denmark looks like in an international college. It's to the left of Jeremy Corbyn, but for what it's worth, the most right to left wing in a Danish sample. And the y-axis is the probability of them getting it right, choosing that correct answer, right, if you do the maths. So look at the top right data point. So that's the most liberal politicians in Denmark. And they get given a case study where the public school is performing better. And they just nail it, right, every time. 92% of them get it right. When the correct answer most strongly accords with their own ideological beliefs. If you go down to the bottom left, the most right-wing Danish politicians, when they're given numbers, the public school is doing really well, they do worse than chance, 40% of them get it. If you're thinking like it's just a problem on one side of the ideological aisle, it's not. If you just invert it, okay, let's just make the private school better, then the opposite thing happens. So now the most right-wing people will see that and say, yes, right on, knew it all along, private school is the best. They get it right 100% of the time, basically. And the more left-wing ones don't. That's concerning, especially when I present this to civil servants. They often look quite dispirited. Because we often think that, fine, I accept that not everyone in government is a perfect reasoning machine. But if I just kick enough information upstairs and hard, cold data, then this stuff will get washed out. Right? The correct decision will get made. And from another angle, it's maybe not surprising that people in government don't always, they tend to agree with, they like to see information which they already agree with. I mean, they might select reports in certain think tanks, which they're ideologically aligned with. But it is kind of concerning from our kind of neutral technocratic perspective that we can't just resolve it showing more data. So that's noticing. Does anyone have initial comments or questions so far? Any chance to sip a bit of water? Okay. So deliberating. That's the stage where, okay, I know it's a problem, what are we going to do about it? Biases which might affect this stage include the illusion of similarity. Yes? Go ahead.
I have a question, which is more about the attention-getting slide that you mentioned earlier.
Yes, my hearing is slightly muffled. Please speak up.
Sorry. So when you're talking about allocation of attention with the example of disasters and people dying in them, did that study take into account at all the racial makeup? Because in the United States, it's a pretty big issue in terms of, I'm thinking of, for example, Puerto Rico and Flint, Michigan, how much attention those disasters got, as opposed to other ones which affect primarily different demographics.
I don't remember if racial component of the host population was controlled for in the graphs I presented, but I think that probably strengthens the case that factors like that will also affect public allocation attention. That's a wonderful example, right? The Puerto Rico disaster, from my perspective, was out in the news in about a week or something. Or Flint is another terrific example. That's probably an example of a less sexy disaster, right? Kind of slow, ongoing, draining resources. Yeah, I agree with that point. So, illusion of similarity. surveyed a few hundred adults in the US. They asked them, for a given policy position, what's your own personal opinion? Take the death penalty. You know, do you support it, do you oppose it? And then on the y-axis there is the second thing they asked them, which is, okay, you told me your opinion. What do you think most other people believe? So that's, on the y-axis, it's going from lowest to highest level of support amongst everyone else. And what do you see? What's that stepping up from pride? The more you support the policy, the more you think everyone supports it. I oppose the death penalty. Yeah, everyone does, right? I support it. Everyone feels that. And it doesn't really matter what policy you ask people about. Character education in schools, gun control, what have you. So illusion of similarity is, I mean, it's this tendency we all have to wrap ourselves in bubbles of people like us. A few people mentioned they use Twitter. The interesting thing about Twitter is it's a blank slate at the start, isn't it? You start following 0 people. It's up to you to follow wherever you want to. And there's been plenty of studies showing that it won't shock you to learn. Most people don't use that as an opportunity to build a nationally representative sample of public opinion. Like, oh, I think, I want to hear from, Boris Johnson today, and Theresa May, and Jeremy Corbyn. I want the full palette. Nobody does that. Instead, people, follow people like them quite innocently, and then they'll just cascade where they're only following people who oppose Brexit or only support it. I mean, I did that myself a few years ago until Brexit happened, and I realized I wasn't explicitly following political people. I was following journalists and historians, and they were all bemoaning Brexit, the referendum victory. And I thought, that's strange. I mean, I didn't consciously set out to build this thought bubble. My own personal opinion about Brexit is irrelevant. I don't want to be exposed only to one side of an argument. I nonetheless done it to myself. Or when people do it, affects politicians too. Affects policy leaders, civil servants. This is a RCC done in the northeastern United States. And it was looking at, I think, free lunches. It was just like an unambiguously good program for kids, and all we need you to do as a parent is to sign up for it. So, like, and education policy is pretty good about doing RCTs on micro-controlled trials, so they didn't know quite the best way to roll it out. So they tried 3 different things. The standard approach, at the bottom left, was the policy exists, you just need to sign up for it, just complete a form. A little bit of effort on your part. The simplified approach is, we'll send you a text message and just reply yes. The automatic approach is, you're in the policy, and now you have to opt out if you don't want to receive it. Which, anyone who's been paying attention in the UK the last 6 years, like if you've seen pension auto enrollment, it's been a ridiculously gargantuan success. Defaulting people into programs is a pretty reliable way to get them to stick to it. And post GDPR, I don't know if you're aware of that new legislation, it's not as easy to do, but in the glory days we could. So the blue bars are what happened in this scenario, right? And if they'd stopped there, this wouldn't be that interesting to study. But they did something else which I love, and I don't know why people don't do this more often. They asked the relevant education leaders, about 140 of them, what do you think is going to happen? Anyone can do that for any RCT. I don't know why it's not habitual. So let's compare the bars. So the blue bar is what happened, right? So when you need to go out there and actually complete the form, 1% of people did so. 8% when you just need to reply to text messages, and 97% when you're already in the thing. You need to do some effort to get out of it. That's fine. The black bars are where the real action is, right? So policymakers, the illusion of similarity aspect here is these policymakers are all swimming in the detail of how they know deeply why this is such a great policy. Why would people not take it up? It's so obviously good. So they think 39% of people are going to exert a bit of effort to sign up to it, which is a massive overstatement. And interestingly, they massively underestimate the effectiveness of defaults. So we in BIT are probably prone to this illusion as well, because we think everyone knows about how effective defaults are by now, but lots of people don't. This is a pretty profound graph. I'm trying to summarize the whole talk. So as I'm going through these examples, again, the civil servants I speak to, they get very defeated, I think. I don't think government's an incoherent mess that never knows what it's doing. It takes on very complex tasks. It's very difficult to know exactly how it's going to turn out. I think it often broadly gets things right, but it's miscalibrated, which is what you see here, right? So the black bars, they actually got the direction correct. They knew that would be more effective than that and more effective than that. They were just totally off in the magnitude. They got literally like 39 more times more people than actually did sign up. Magnify that across a national rollout of all policy. You might blithely expect millions of people to sign up to it, like you might expect with the Green Deal, with the marriage allowance. Last time I checked, 2.5 million people have not signed up to receive free money. It takes about a 15-minute phone call, but most people haven't heard about it or don't care. That's illusion of similarity. We in government we know why this is a good idea. Often people out there in the real world are busy living their lives. They don't have time to listen to us, or that we don't do a good enough job of making them aware of the policy. We don't think it's that important. It's so obvious to us. Why do we do it? Broader issue is, you might think like, if we just got enough expertise or talked about it long enough, we realize these blind spots. That might not always happen. This is the group reinforcement bias we talked about in the paper. There's a lot going on here. The simplified version is, this graph is looking at the Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee. And that committee has internal members and external members, and they issue opinions every so often. And the individual members can dissent from those opinions. The external members of that committee, when they come on board, they don't know anyone there. They've been working in finance for 10 or 20 years. They don't care about going to the Christmas party and being friends with people on the committee. They dissent at the same rate on day 1 as day 300 or year 3. Right from the start, when they dissent, 15% of opinions they disagree with. These are the internal members. So the longer they've been on the committee, the more comfortable they become with dissenting, which isn't shocking. Like who on day 1 of a job or working in government was as effective and bold in their role as they are in month 6 or something? It takes time to habituate. One guy, okay, right on. You're a confident man, I like that. This is, I'm not like studying anyone by saying it takes time to like onboard and culture and acclimatize to a new job environment. This is pretty concerning though when you think that the civil service is just perpetually criticized for having a turnover crisis. There's a lot of people in civil service who are quite young, who are enrolled for 6 months or a year and then move on. I gave a talk at Dexit, the Brexit department, a few weeks ago rather. That has the double whammy of being the youngest department and the department with the highest rate of turnover. So you have a 28-year-old who's negotiating with an person on the EU side who's 60 years old, been doing it for decades, and then they'll be out of that job in 6 months anyway. And they're all very nice, intelligent, hard-working people out there. They have a tremendously difficult job, but they're in a structure which is not enabling them to flourish necessarily. Let's deliberate. So, final stage of the policy making process, executing. So this was the least sexy. And it's all pointing towards optimism. Why is that? This was a study done recently. These are the national level politicians I mentioned earlier, from Belgium, Israel, and Canada. About 140 of them, I think, on this graph. So on the x-axis there is an overconfidence index. And that was measured by asking them, how likely do you think it is you're going to be re-elected? And then comparing that against an objective measure of the same thing, like polling data, historical averages. And on the y-axis, you have a risk-taking score. The higher it is, the more risk-taking they are. That's the Asian disease task again. People just can't get enough of that. So there's 2 interesting things about this graph, I think. The first is that just the correlation, right? So the more overconfident, more willing to endorse a risky policy option, which isn't a huge surprise. Lots of people in the civil service have a pretty good sense of what their minister is like. Is he a cautious person? Is she a risk-taking person? Does it affect how you write reports? Do you want to present this as a bold new innovation or just business as usual? What's the second interesting thing about the graph? I'll give you a hint. Ignore the y-axis.
They're all over.
Say again, please.
Everyone is very overconfident.
Everyone is very overconfident, except that guy. Probably a woman, actually. Men tend to be more overconfident. Okay. They're all overconfident, and not a little bit, right? It's not like they're just over the edge. Some of them are massively, gigantically overconfident. I usually pause at this point when I'm meeting with civil servants, and we just reflect on this for about 10 minutes. And I asked, does this surprise people? Is this baked into the cake? Anyone who works near government, we all know it already. When we write reports, we already take it into account. Some of you mentioned you worked in government before. Is this surprising to you?
No, I work for a minister who'd be very confident.
You worked with someone very overconfident?
Personality type to get into that, to go that far.
Pardon me?
You need a certain personality type to be in politics and to get up there. I mean, you need a certain amount of confidence. Yes, that would be the least negative way to. Yes.
What do other people think about that? It's just a personality selection effect, and you're not going to make it in politics if you're not that way.
Well, what would it look like in general population? I mean, people in general are overconfident.
You think people in general? You're asking, or you think that's your opinion?
It's a valid hypothesis.
I think we have that.
The current index just asked about re-election, or did it ask about
Re-election, sure. Re-election. So doesn't necessarily imply they're overconfident in every dimension of their life. The statement is.
I was just kind of surprised that people who had very low confidence that they would be re-elected didn't have sort of a loose cannon effect where they might be willing to take more risks because they knew their career was.
Okay, that's funny, yeah. Let's tear it all down. I'm not a job anyway. Any other comments on it?
If I ask you a question, I think you ask any politician, what do you think you can tell the next election? 99 out of 100 are going to say I'm going to win.
Yeah, okay. There's measurement error here, right? So it's just a bit of bravado maybe. That'll be some of the story. I don't think it's the whole story. Just because the fact it's 3 different countries and every sample you look at it and you see it overconfidence. It surprised me. I mean, the problem here is the word over, right? Confidence is fine, but overconfidence implies delusion. And I don't know if that's necessarily what you want in a politician, but I agree with the argument that if underconfident politicians, I've never seen a politician on the campaign trail whose pitch was like, I don't know how this is going to work out, I'll do my best. I'll give it the old college try. They just don't survive. They get weeded out, don't they?
We have
But-
it with other professions as well, though, don't we? Like police officers and doctors that are overly confident in their judgment. So it's not necessarily limited to the nature of the job, so to speak.
Yes.
But having to be certain with the decision we make.
Okay, so it's not restricted. That's interesting, yeah. So can anyone think of a profession which likely selects for underconfident people? Or at least well-calibrated people? I was asked that and I'm not sure. I don't know if there's good empirical data on it. Pardon? Priests. Okay, let's expand on that later maybe. I don't know, really successful hedge fund CEOs where their beliefs are tested against the market punishingly every day. I guess it would have to be an environment where, I guess true expertise is only developed, right? You've got regular, unambiguous feedback. Something like that kind of environment, and that's not possible. Sorry, I interrupted your comment.
Oh, sorry. Very particular types of lawyers, like people who work on like legal disclaimers and things, maybe.
Okay. Again, yeah, that's interesting. People who are very close to end users, maybe, just people who are at the coalface, which again, politicians and also senior civil servants are not. Do you think senior civil servants are not like this? Are they temperamentally different? Or are you temperamentally different? Many of you are MPP students, right? You're all like looking at these overconfident buffoons and saying, not me, confident. Well, fortunately I've been measuring that the last few weeks. So, the thing is, like I mentioned before, it's really hard to prove a decision was biased, right? Affected by biased reasoning. You really need to be in someone's head or read minutes or something, which you can do with the Bank of England Committee to that extent. So what we're doing here is basically coming at this from many angles, looking at lots of studies. A few months ago we ran a survey with real civil servants, with 60 of them from all over government, department, IFID, Exeter Department, DWP, Home Office, Treasury, and we gave them definitions of each of these biases. And we asked them, here's an example of how it might affect policy making. So, have you as a civil servant, and the median was like 10 or 11 years of experience in our sample in government, have you as a civil servant ever seen these biases affect policy making in a meaningful way? On a scale of never to always. And these were the results. So, people saying, yes, I've seen that meaningfully affect policy, sometimes, often, or always. It looks like North Korean, I know. The average is 91%. I'm not saying that's knockout evidence. I'm sure there was some selection bias here where the only people who had completed a 10-minute survey about bias in government had like massive chips on their shoulders about the prevalence of bias in government. But I'm just taking it as suggestive evidence again that, okay, maybe it's a problem. It was reassuring to us, right? We spent a long time working on this report with mostly dry academic examples and then wondering, like, this is actually a thing. We just need to go out and speak to some servants. In terms of what these biases actually look like in the wild, I've been giving you lots of examples of kind of snapshot moments of judgment, right? Pretty low stakes academic environments. What about high stakes when politicians are making real decisions? Well, you can look at case studies, right? Is anyone familiar with this, the 1992 coal mine closures? Okay, so in 1992, this is about 6 months after the Conservative Party was returned to power, but I think it's still the highest number of votes ever received by a winning party in Britain, even though it was in 1992, the population is growing. So the plan was to enact the next wave of privatisations. And this time the plan was to close about 30 coal mines, with the loss of about 50,000 jobs. That's not ideal. Fortunately, I remember the next two slides, so. Okay, we'll let that continue. Okay, I'll just describe graphs and we'll see how it goes. So, 200,000 people ended up marching on London a day or two after that was announced. So we'd been through this quite prolonged policy-making process known as state deliberation. And at the execution stage, here we are, people revolted. People marched on London, the policy was abandoned. I mentioned how surprise is a really useful diagnostic tool in trying to identify biased policy-making. This was an example. I don't know why I'm pointing to the screen anymore. This was an example of the government being very surprised. This was not at all what they expected. Did someone possibly help me retrieve my PowerPoint? Oh, we're in business. I think I got a. Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay. So, unsurprisingly, they back down. Why is that a good case study? Because it was 1992 and now we can read the minutes, which we did. So these are real quotes. The top there is giving you the context. I love this understatement. Prime Minister was dissatisfied how that had gone. So he asked that post-mortem be conducted. And these are quotes from that post-mortem. There was a widespread failure to foresee the strength of public reaction. That's a nice indicator of illusion of similarity. Everyone in government thought this was going to go swimmingly, and it did not once it was announced. It made contact with reality. Officials became captured by their early prejudice. That's a beautiful description of confirmation bias. Right? Ideologically, you get fixated on a certain position and you just lock into that and you continue on that track for months. Outside information is not disturbing. Rather than being about to take credit for the next popular privatization, he, the minister in charge, discovered that he was to act as the undertaker to the coal industry. There was just a very different internal framing of this whole policy than was being perceived on the outside. It's more interesting context in the report. Like the minister in question, Michael Heseltine, he'd spent months in the build-up to this fighting with Treasury about the compensation package for the miners. So Treasury wanted to give them, say, £25,000 each, and Heseltine fought for £30,000 each. That was like a big win, right? So government attention and resources really focused on that for months, and they came out of it with this seeming win. Like, this is going to, really please these fired coal miners who just lost their jobs. Of course, like on day one, the big news is you're losing your job. And the miners don't care that much then, but they wanted to give you 25, and I bet you 30,000. Doesn't matter how big a win you think it is. But that made content reality it wasn't a priority. So I started by saying the broader context of this work is originally with behavioural insights, it's always been outward focused on citizens and consumers. We're trying to focus it more on government, but still at the kind of abstract level. What about people who are in government right now? So I administered this survey with the understanding that I would not disclose with the department. But it is a real government department, as of a few weeks ago, and 160 people completed. I'll show you the methodology behind these results in the next slide. Is that your question? Yeah. Okay. I love how you take 9 for granted. These are the results. Well, long story short, you asked before, maybe the general population is overconfident. I think that's probably the case. In this case, 1 in 5 people were well calibrated, and 60% were overconfident. And this was not the worst department that we administered to. So the trend that seems to be, oh, you're taking a picture. Good God, this is going to go terribly. This is that's fine. Don't tweet it. Oh God.
I'm going to tweet it, I promise.
Okay. So the trend, which is a small sample so far, the trend I've seen so far is the more senior the people in the audience, the more overconfident they are. Which accords with my general intuition that people who are close to the day-to-day, the grindstone of interacting with end users, they don't have space to allow the spices to flourish. More senior people, very intelligent, very competent, but just divorced from that general interaction. And also they've been promoted lots of times, they know they're very good at their jobs, so that confidence kind of spills out into judgments where they're not really equipped to make good assessments. So that overconfident, the majority is always overconfident. I've administered it I think 5 or 6 times now. to multiple government departments. Here's the methodology. So in this case, it's called a calibration survey. Has anyone ever taken one? Okay, I like calibration surveys. I encourage you to take one. You can just Google them and find them yourself. Find them. If you Google "Are you well calibrated?" (BIT), you'll find a blog post I wrote on the same topic, which goes into the methodology. Are you well calibrated? So here's how they're administered. This is a short version. So I asked 10 questions, all of which were true or false. Those are the questions. Or should be. Those are the questions. This is the real answer, true or false. This is the portion of the sample which got the right answer. If I'd stopped there, this would have been a totally trivial exercise, just a quiz, right? But the point is this last column. For every question, I ask people, how confident are you in your answer? If you're saying true or false, how confident are you that you're right? On a scale of 50%, like flipping a coin, I'm not at all sure, I'm just guessing, to 100%. I'm completely confident, I would bet my mortgage on this. If you're a well-calibrated person, when you say 100%, that should always happen. You should never be wrong. To be well-calibrated is for these two numbers to track each other perfectly, up and down. So let's look at some of the questions, so maybe this will make more sense. Bill Gates is the richest person in the world. That's false. 85% of people got that right. They said false correctly. It's Jeff Bezos, right? And they're 85% confident. They're perfectly calibrated on that question. A hockey puck fits in a golf ball. Nobody knows that, right? They see this strange combination of hobbies. 38, it's true, but 38% of people got that right, but are unjustifiably confident in their answer. Why would you be confident? Beauty and the Beast was the highest grossing film globally. It was not 50, but around chance, 54% of people got it right, 65% confidence. That's overconfidence. More confident than their ability actually warrants. Oh, this is a bad one. The Infrastructure and Projects Authority estimates successful delivery is probable for more than 40% of projects in the government's major project portfolio. Does anyone know how much the projects in that portfolio are worth? Between 300 and 400 billion pounds. And that's not true. They estimate successful delivery is probable for about 1 in 5 of them. 15% of people get that right, they're overconfident again. The trend is for when they're really right about something, they tend to kind of know it. When they're not right about something, they really have a poor sense of it. I've been going pretty deep on this calibration stuff lately. Yeah, go ahead.
We're only at the 10 questions asked or more?
Pardon me?
We're only these 10 questions asked?
Only 10. If I could think I could get them to answer more, I'd ask more. The more you do, the better the calibration measurement will
But
be.
do you not think that participants potentially got bored and just used the scale to indicate
No.
the random score of their
I don't.
confidence?
Basically, the average completion times of the survey have been 3 to 4 minutes, which to me implies they're not just clicking through. When I've looked at the data, the distribution doesn't seem to imply that, like everyone clustering at the right side of the scale, which is what I've seen in the past when people are just, I just want to finish the survey. And also the people answering it are pretty serious-minded, and they're pretty keen on, they don't take this sort of thing lightly in experience. If they're bored with the survey, they just won't do it, or if they're not into it. And there'll always be measurement error. I can't guarantee that everyone answered this with their utmost attention. It is true that it's low stakes, right? They didn't have money on the line, so they weren't putting their full game into it. But it is interesting that no matter where I administer the sample, no matter which government department it is, the graph always looks basically the same. There's clustering on the overconfident side, never underconfident. Yes?
I mean, how do you measure this, or do you measure this at all, the idea of like the Dunning-Kruger effect, this like the less you know, the more you're confident?
What would be the empirical prediction of that theory? So would that be the less educated my sample, the more overconfident?
Not necessarily less educated, but the less people know about a particular topic, the more confident they are in answering. Whereas I guess, I mean, the way they try to explain that maybe is that the more you know about a topic, the more you understand it's complicated and there's nuances, and the more
Yes.
you tend to undervalue your knowledge in that area.
It's interesting. I mean, to me, that would be implying that the more senior you are, the less you should be affected by overconfidence.
Right.
Because you're
So
older and more
it's
experienced.
the total opposite of what you found.
It's not born out. I mean, I haven't invented calibration surveys, right? So there might be better data out there that looks into it. I've just been using them as this diagnostic tool within government, so I can't answer that, but that's interesting. This gentleman.
Is this kind of like could be worse than what it is now, because not many people even put 100% of for example, if he like cut off those like, does like normally you put as a percentage income the fringes?
I don't cut off the 100%. I'm actually surprised by how little people take the idea of 100% seriously. It's working out as for questions answered with 100% confidence, they're right about 85% of the time, which is awful. Like that's a fatal blow to your ability to make sensible judgments. There was another question there.
More generally, what was the spread on the confidence choices that they made? Were there a lot that were on extreme on the lower end, or was everyone basically around top 50%?
Probably kind of normally distributed, like clustering on 60, 70, 80. I mean, that'll be affected by the questions you use as well. I try to get a decent spread. There is a trend that like the more confident they are, the more right they tend to be. Like it's not a complete mess. But again, the interesting thing is it's always landing on the side of overconfidence. And there might be like reasons I can't quite comprehend why that's the case. There was a good Nature paper a few years ago arguing that overconfidence is just an evolutionarily adaptive strategy, or it's just a practical way to create large organizations. Like NASA is probably pretty overconfident, right? Overconfidence typically implies can-do attitude, it's a fun place to work, lots of positive people. That's an easier way to motivate people than we're all just here dryly assessing the cost-benefit ratios and probabilities of action, and then we'll make a decision based on that. No one goes home like, pumping their arms after a day in that environment. So there's a 3-hour version of this talk, which is a proper like a training workshop version, involves group tasks. And in that, I go pretty deep on the idea of calibration. Because, well, let me ask you this. If I ask you to summarize the state of your physical health in a single quantitative statistic, which one would you choose? Or is there one you would choose? Does anything come to mind? With all those limitations, just in a single number, tell me how healthy you are. What would you say? 10. Yeah, that works. But like an objectively measured medical statistic, maybe. Like BMI might be one way. Body fat percentage. Resting heart rate. I don't know, I'm not a doctor, but there are lots, I think. What if I asked you, how good are you at making judgments? And then typically silence, unless you're going to say 10 again.
No, maybe 8.
Good to see there's not overconfidence in this room at least. To me that's kind of profound and strange. To me a mark of a well-educated person should not just be to know a lot of things, but to know what you know and know what you don't know, which is what calibration fundamentally measures. For a well-calibrated person, like I said before, those two numbers should track each other perfectly. When you know things, that's fine. When you don't know stuff, your confidence should drop off a cliff. It never does, it just drops a little bit. People have a general sense, oh, I don't quite know this, but they know, well, I've answered lots of other things correct in my life, I'm sure I'll get this right. That just doesn't happen. So that implies, again, low stakes, right? These people work in organizations where they'll interact with coworkers. I'm not saying that all their decisions, when they're making important decisions and reasoned policies, they will activate higher level reasoning processes where they'll be embedded in organizations which encourage those. But it is interesting that the default heuristic that people always land on seems to be overconfidence. I'm not overconfident. I'm well calibrated. Yes?
I'm just wondering, would there be, so we all kind of seem to agree that there are students that it's just overconfidence and some bad effects, but would there be something that overconfidence benefits? Is there a benefit to it?
It must be, right? It's so pervasive, it must be beneficial. Yeah, I mean,
it's going to be governance efficiency, right?
Efficiency?
Yeah, if you have confidence decision makers, you know, what you can make confidence.
You're saying confident instead of overconfident. That's different, right?
Well, if you have overconfidence decision makers.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe like in the long term, just an ecosystem of people who just are comfortable making quick decisions. If just balance out on net, more good decisions get made than negative. And the fact that it's so pervasive, it's not for me to say, let's tear it all down. Everyone needs to be well calibrated. There must be some reason that it's coming out that way. Maybe with different systems we could promote better calibration. That to me is like the long-term goal of all this behavioural government. So how can we get to a better calibrated ecosystem? Such that we're not just only promoting overconfident people and we're not just writing reports that then get kicked upstairs to overconfident ministers and whatnot. Do you have a comment?
I did have a question. Do you have any data about the gender divide between overconfident people and well-calibrated, or just confident or underconfident?
A gender divide, did you say?
Gender divide. Because I mean, I am not very confident in saying this because I don't know what the numbers would be, but I would theorize that there probably is a gender divide between overconfident, how many overconfident men there are, and how many overconfident women there are.
As far as I know, the empirical data is that men tend to be overconfident. It will not shock you to learn. I don't know how big the divide is, and I haven't looked into it. In my samples, I don't ask people's gender, because I just want to complete it as quickly as possible. But yeah, interesting comment. It'll probably vary by grade as well as age or.
Yeah, within that context, we might actually want to consider that men are more likely to be in senior positions. They will have more experience within their position, and that might also correlate with their overconfidence.
Yes, yeah, it might be an artifact of gender. I mean, it still would be overconfidence maybe, that's the problem with coming through because of overrepresentation of men. Okay. So the good news is, I'm not just like harassing different government departments and shaking my fist at them, because it's true of everyone I've measured. These are the results from the BID blog, which you'd think would be a pretty savvy audience. So over 1,000 people completed it, looks pretty much the same. This is BID, don't tell anyone. That's about half of BID, BID's not that big. And that's actually the best results I've seen so far, and it's still 1 in 3 by calibration. Interestingly, the highest proportion yet I've seen of underconfidence. And on average, we work out as a well-calibrated organization, thank God. Because our whole thing is like, we're good arbiters of evidence, you can trust us. Which, if that was true, we really should be well-calibrated.
Do you think that might also reflect that people a bit know what a calibration test is?
They didn't before I gave them this. It was a Christmas party thing, so. Yeah. But that's interesting because nobody's ever, whenever I talk about calibration tests, no one's ever heard of them. And to me, it's such an obvious bit of, I don't know, intellectual hygiene that everyone should engage in and that you could all train yourself to do. You could all be well calibrated in a few weeks. It's just a matter of introspection. And you said, like, I'm not sure how confident I am about this. If you just keep habitually thinking that way, I mean, it won't make you, like, you won't be a hit at parties. But if you're like in an environment like this, you should really be thinking seriously about when you know things and when you don't. That's my thing. I'm happy to talk more about this because I think we talked about this for an hour in the longer version. Okay, I don't want to keep you here all day. So, long story short, there's 3 goals in this report. The first is to raise awareness of these biases, which we try to achieve just by doing workshops and by encouraging people to read the report. Behavioural Government, Google it, it's online. And the second is suggesting ways to individually de-bias people. So, when you go back to your desk, you go back to your teams, you're working in government, what can you actually do? This might feel underwhelming after all the build-up. There are a few things. So one thing we do in BIT is we use think groups. It's the opposite of groupthink. It's a super lame joke. I'm sorry. We use them in BIT. And this is to tackle problems in that deliberation stage when you're trying to figure out what you're going to do. Think groups. Has anyone ever been in a meeting which they felt was not a good use of their time? Okay, that's reassuring. And the rest of you, I think, just have not been in meetings yet. So I agree. I have to. I've been in, brainstorming sessions where the dynamic has been, okay, everything's open. Let's just go for ideas. One guy shouts out something, or one lady shouts out something. Oh, that's a good idea. Let's talk about that for 10 minutes. Is it really though? But we're down that rabbit hole. Or the most senior person in the room speaks first. I wonder if that will affect subsequent dynamic. Maybe it will. We use think groups. They're kind of like a radically democratic idea where super like nuts and bolts, get everyone in the room or join online, whatever. Open an anonymous Google Doc. So you'll see 10 people are in the document. You see mouse cursors jumping around, but you don't know who's who. You don't know who's the most senior person who's got experience in the area. Put some structure into that document. How do we increase tax compliance in Kyrgyzstan? Here are the key stakeholders, here are the key barriers. Have at it. Maybe give some reference to your ideas, upvote other people's ideas. It's just super straightforward and simple. But it's a beautiful thing. I've worked on projects with think groups, done at the start and without. And the ones without, to me, they tend to fall more into classic project management errors of not anticipating the full sweep of ideas we could have done, or problems that could arise. And it's just, they're wonderful to engage in. You might be feeling stressed on what you're going to do. You do a think group and suddenly 2,000, 5,000 words just bloom on the page very, very quickly. And then you do another session, you kind of organize that. It's just a very quick way of really putting together all the ideas that are in your organization and not doing it in a traditional meeting format. One thing you can do is make it easier to challenge pre-existing views. So this kind of overconfidence epidemic implies that policies will fail more often because they don't get enough challenge rather than because they get too much challenge. So what can you do about that? You can do things like break points, it's not like a world-shattering idea, but Government, again, works on complex projects, and often you might have a brief at the start, a clear idea of what you want to do. Time passes, and that gets worked, right? Like, data wasn't available, key stakeholders changed, ministers changed, there was another election. So you might be 9 months in or 18 months in, and it's quite different when we're at the start. And projects tend to have their own inertial momentum, just that they will continue on regardless. You saw the Green Deal at the start, right? 4 people signed off, and yet it continued for 2 more years. People are also affected by things like sunk cost bias, right? You've already put enough time and resource into this, that's enough reason to keep doing it, rather than whether it's a good idea on its own terms. Breakpoints is just the kind of unsexy idea of, at the start of this, why don't we just set some red lines? Like, if by month 9 we spent more than X, we should probably think about cancelling. If by month 12 we have to manage to acquire this data set, we should probably think about cancelling. And you probably know better examples of that than me. I mean, the classic one is, I guess, military spending, right? Where, does anyone remember like the early days of the Iraq War when Dick Cheney and George Bush were laughing off the idea that would ever cost more than $200 million? Now it's at 2 or 3 trillion, I think. I mean, I'm not saying that you necessarily need to reveal your breakpoints to the world, because that might be strategic information you want to keep close to your chest, but maybe think about them internally. Another thing you can do is red teaming. Has anyone done red teaming before? Or worked anyone been with the military? Interestingly, the military are always at like a cutting edge of decision theory. Because they're in such a high stakes environment, they're totally keen on doing these types of ideas. Red teaming is, you need to do this project, guys, rah, 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 let's get super motivated. You guys over there, you're my red team, and I want you to explicitly attack the policy and tell you why it's going to fail. Right? You're liberated from having to be a good team player, and having to be super positive every week, and just tell us why this is going to fail. That's one way you do it. Another is to run zero interest scenarios, right? Tackle those biases at the top right. I think that should be done for every policy. Again, you're swimming in the detail, you know why it's great. Just imagine that nobody cares. If you go into the world, nobody cares. They're too busy, the benefits of it are not obvious to them, what are you going to do? Just basic kind of contingency plan. Doesn't necessarily always get done. Or you can run pre-mortems. Is anyone familiar with that term? Okay, a few people. That's a term popularized by the decision theorist Gary Klein. Post-mortems, you know what that means, right? It failed while it failed. Pre-mortems is much more useful. I'm working on a policy now. Let's imagine I'm 12 months in the future and the policy has failed. It has bombed completely. Why did that happen? Let's work backwards from failure. Write down reasons, especially reasons we wouldn't be comfortable bringing up in an ordinary meeting, and discuss it. Works best if you can get stakeholders from across the policy area in the room. Like if we're doing an RCT at BIP, do a pre-mortem with not just us at BIP, but the people on the ground who are going to deliver. Say we're delivering letters, get the postman in there. This has happened before where we spent months designing something. The letter we came up with did not fit in letterboxes. I know I lead London consultancy, right? But we only discovered that because we involved the people who were interacting with end users, people throughout the mechanism of that trial. Pre-mortems, I just habitually not used, I know for a fact. I found them incredibly useful, I highly recommend them. There hasn't been like RCT evidence I can point to show you that organizations who use pre-mortems will way better. It can be an hour-long meeting where you get stakeholders involved, you talk about what's going to go wrong. I've done those in the past, found them really useful. I think you'd be amazed. Like everyone's positive week to week, but then when you say, okay, just imagine it's failed. Turns out everyone's got lots of ideas why that's happened, but they've never mentioned them. IT reasons is a common one, because who owns IT problems in a project, right? Certainly not me, I'm not going to break it up, but it's something that can scupper most projects. Goal number 3 was, how can we structurally debias government? So imagine like the people who are attending these training seminars, they walk out individually debiased, they become well calibrated, they're using think groups, they're using keywords. But then they go back to this ecosystem which most overconfident people and which encourages that type of overconfidence and optimism bias. What can you actually do? There's a few things. So I've got 2 ideas I think I present here. So one is you can invest for windows of opportunity. Does anyone watch Blue Planet? Okay, so there was the episode last November, which the episode ends with David Attenborough speaking about the problem of plastic in the sea. I talked a lot about policy failure. This is an example of tremendous policy success. It's like a dog that didn't bark. Could have been a big issue if it didn't. You guys probably didn't think about it because it wasn't a big issue, but it could have been. So he talked about that, and then if you do the Google Analytics, plastic in the sea, that search term on Google just like spikes as soon as he stops talking. And then it got pretty decent news coverage for a few weeks after. So that kind of harks back to that first graph we looked at, right? If people care about a thing, what's wrong with politicians responding to that? That is, yeah, that's fine. Our job as technocrats is that if that happens, let them at least have a well thought through policy that they can pick up. So they're not just scrambling for action and doing whatever. And that's what happened in this case. This is the Foresight Future of the City report written by the Government Office for Science. I love their work. I think they do great stuff. It's been horizon scanning. So Foresight put out like 2 or 3 reports every year. Things like future of cities, future of mobility, kind of often like low probability, high impact events. This was Future of the City. It was commissioned about 2 years before that Blue Planet episode. I don't think they coordinated, but they might have secretly. So when David Attenborough raised public consciousness about it, this report was to hand. You open it, it's about 100 pages. Control F, plastic and C, it's like 4 dimensions. It's exhaustively thought through. They're already aware it's an issue, and here's what the British government should do about it. So when there was like momentum to actually capitalize on that problem, the government could pick up this report and say, okay, here's what we're going to do, and here's the specific action we're going to take. That was an example of tremendous policy success. People are aware of the idea of horizon scanning, maybe not in the context of reducing biased policy making. That's one thing you can do. Another is to use trials and simulations to break the illusion of control and optimism bias. So we at BIT have run more than 500 RCTs across governments in the last 8 years, across all sorts of different policy areas. RCTs are nice because they just kind of jump over this whole problem of biased reasoning. With biased reasoning, you might think, like, if I just, work hard enough to correct it, or if I just make better judgments, it'll be fun. Why not just circumvent all of that? Just go out to the field and collect data empirically. It's a different way of thinking about policy, The idea is everyone familiar with RCTs? We aren't presuming a lot of knowledge on behalf of the audience. It's like the gold standard of generating good scientific evidence, right? So the key thing I want to call your attention to is the idea of building evaluation is at the design stage and not afterwards. Lots of people in government now are on board with the idea of using RCTs, but still at the end of policies. Okay, we did the policy, just tell us how effective it was. Did it achieve the outcomes you want? It's less effective than when you're in that design stage of just kind of iteratively figuring out how the policy is going to work by testing it multiple times. I don't want to name and shame policies, but I will. Does anyone know what the FIT note is? Sick note? Have you heard of sick note? So 2010, before then, you could go, if you were unwell in employment, you could go to the doctor and get a sick note. He would say, okay, you're not fit for work. That was the only option on the form. You're not fit for work. Don't need to go to work for 2 weeks. That was replaced in 2010 by the fit note. Basically the same thing. But they wanted to change the structure of that conversation so it was more about, you're unwell, but actually, being in work in the long term is good for your health. Rather than this just being, you're not fit for work, thanks for your time, let's have a conversation about, is maybe you can get back to work with a bit of modification and sort of thing. That was rolled out nationally after a very minimal pilot stage. And there are now 2 options on fit note. Not fit for work, or maybe fit for work. And for the last few years, 94% of fit notes have been registered not fit for work. So was it worth generating a whole new policy which gets used in a slightly different way 6% of it? And it's now out there. It's a little bit late to change the design. And again, I don't want to when I bring up individual examples like Green Deal or marriage allowance, it's not to pile on those. Again, government's got a tough job, and the culture of designing policy doesn't always mean it's conducive to getting to the best policy outcome. So you can build evaluations of the policy design. Apple didn't build the iPhone by just thinking about it from a desk and then sending the fully completed version out into the world. You can also just adapt your policy in response to that evidence, which we're talking about in our report, test and adapt. I have one more structural solution, and I don't know how to explain it in less than 30 minutes. In a word, it's about forecasting. If you read the book Super Forecasting, that's like a hint of what I have in mind. But that's all I have for today. So thank you very much for your time. I'll take any questions if you have any more. Why not? And where there was a lot of Q&A throughout that. So. Yes,
I guess I'm still interested in the external validity of the kind of studies that are used here. Are the types of forms or surveys that you've used publicly available for people to look at? Or could you talk a bit more about this design?
So it's interesting. So basically, we wrote this report published a few months ago, and it's summarizing all the best evidence that's out there today. And it was a good time to write it because it's just been a complicated study in the last 3-5 years even on this topic. Until now, nobody's really been looking at bias amongst policymakers. So what's there is the best you're going to get. There's not a gold standard like a group of studies doing this who was working with like real politicians. They're just really hard to get samples of real politicians in civil service. In terms of like external validity, it'll vary, right? Like some of the studies I cite will be just adults, general adults rather than politicians per se. And it'll always tend to be low stakes surveys, just because the reality is it's extremely difficult to measure biased policymaking up close without the benefit of some minutes written 25 years ago. But in the report we cite a lot of papers which I think probably, the newer ones especially, will have like open data policies. You'll be able to pull out their survey instruments and look for yourself and see how convincing you think they are. Please, gentlemen, yes?
Thank you for the presentation. I just have a question with reference to the amount of time that will be required to invest in these like solutions, especially trying to sell great points to policymakers, telling them that they can reverse whatever they've invested in terms of primary resources. How do you suggest this can be done?
Slowly, with great patience. Implementing these solutions, particularly the one I omitted, but I'm happy to talk about later, forecasting, would change the nature of government. Different people would be getting promoted, it would be a completely different culture. And to aggressively push those people would, in some cases, be inviting to put themselves down for a job, possibly, you know what I mean? Like, I'm exaggerating a bit, but you're asking people like, let's, do governance in a pretty different way, not a radically different way. A lot of this stuff would be a complement to existing tools we use, trying to sharply point at the spear. But it is a bit of a challenge. All I can tell you is that I've been doing talks and training seminars with real civil servants for the last few months, and although they are kind of horrified, they are personally keen on the solution stage. Like, they didn't go into government to just lounge around and not try and make a difference. They're highly motivated people. I guess personally the big issue, if we can kind of like get one of these solutions funded and tested at a government department, I think we can maybe build some momentum. But we'll have to just be opportunistic over the next year or two and see what comes of it. This lady is. Oh sure, yeah. Should we do like 2 more questions? Yeah, sure.
I was just wondering, it's kind of like academic studies have been good at understanding how individuals commit these common biases. But I was just wondering whether they change in intensity and frequency in groups and working groups in departments. So like, do people commit the same biases as they do as individuals as they do in their working group with their other employees, like co-workers and stuff like that?
That's a great question.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a great question. Of course, we all work in groups, right? Groups are the thing, really.
Yeah.
And it's much easier, of course, to measure individual reactions. In the report, we do talk more about how groups might amplify decision biases. You saw a bit of that in the deliberation stage. Things like groupthink, which is well known, illusion of similarity. Everyone around you thinks the same thing. You're probably not going to divert your opinion. There might be some cases where processes will discourage biased reasoning, but on net, I don't know what the answer is. Yeah, this gentleman.
So I'm curious, this is a little bit of a leading question, but does enlightening people about these sort of biases help people prevent performing them in their daily tasks? And I'm curious if like education, such as these seminars that you've been having with current civil servants has been a process in trying to remediate that issue as well.
Does telling people about biases reduce them? Is that your question?
Exactly.
I hope so. So I'm trying to get this upscaled and become a regular part of existing civil service training infrastructure. And in the process of trying to do that, I would also embed an evaluation component. I don't have the confidence that necessarily just telling people will meaningfully help. So this is me trying to be well calibrated again. I hope so, right? How could it hurt telling people about these things? But maybe it's doing damage, I'm not sure. Okay, Adam, should we wrap up? Will we close the time?
Yeah. Still.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.